Okay, so we're now moving into what we're calling immersive experiments. And these have been designed especially for this session by myself with Alex Levene. And they really are a chance for you to stretch the boundaries of how you're thinking through these the notion of economic science fiction, but in general, how you can take innovative, speculative, edgy thinking and apply it into your own work. In designing them, I've chosen to see them as a kind of orienteering exercise. That helps me a lot when I'm kind of moving through new unknown territory, to know that I actually have something that acts as kind of a compass. So if you wish, you can use this booklet as a kind of compass. We are pushing you out of your comfort zone a little bit with these experiments, so I really do encourage you to trust that this is a safe space. There is unknown, but none of it is scary. This is where we're experimenting. And in order to really kind of step into this world, we're actually going to get out of our seats. So I ask all of you to please put your chairs in, because we will be following this white line you see on the ground. Move your chairs in so that there's enough room. Pick up your booklet, because you will need that. Bring a pen with you. Make sure you have a booklet and a pen and your body and the mind of your body. If you see some stray chairs crossing the line, please kindly just move them away. And as you just find a spot on this white line that moves around the room, just find a spot, and when you're there, just stand with your thoughts in your body. You need a booklet, a pen, and the many different knowledges inside you. We have our intellect, we have our heart, we have our senses. We're now going to bring them all together, the collective intelligence of our whole selves. And we're going to be moving fast. So the key here is to trust yourself, go with the flow. If you miss a bit, it doesn't matter. Keep moving. As Malka so eloquently said, the future is not linear. We are not in a linear territory here. The only reason you are standing on a line right now is because as we enter, we might just need something to follow for a moment so that we can expand our minds and our worlds. So as I briefly mentioned earlier, there are 3 different phases to these experiments. We're going to be going for about an hour, just over, maybe 80 minutes until the end of the session, when we'll have a little bit of a closing, just so you know how to pace yourself. The first section is called orientations. Orientations is basically a chance for you to really orient to how economic science fiction, or let's just say current system and speculative fiction, how they relate to your work right now. So the first phase is orientations. How does your context, your work, yourself fit in, relate to economic science fiction? The second phase is called speculations. This is where we really stretch the elastic. We stretch it, we stretch the bounds. It doesn't matter how far, how wild we go. And then in the third phase, applications, we let that elastic go and it falls back into a shape that can hold those wild ideas, those what-ifs, those possible worlds, into a way in which we can apply them in our work now. And that is applications. And that's the final phase. Almost all of this has different, is self-guided. So you'll actually notice that in the booklet, we actually explain each activity. So if you're not listening fully, that's perfectly fine. Listen with your heart, listen with your knee. You've got it all right here, and you get to take this home. Some of it is done independently, some of it is done with another person, and some of it is done in groups. You do not need to know the people you are working with. You don't even need to introduce yourself if you don't wish. Meet them in that moment. Meet them in the world that you're sharing, that you're creating together. So, are we all ready? Are there any questions before we begin? We're good? Alex? Yes.
Mostly unintentional. So if you are following the line around as part of the next step, and you come to the end, you will see that there is a short jump that you need to take. You don't have to take it physically. I don't require you to make an actual leap. But as a mental exercise, it's quite nice. So yes, there is a short gap just here. Continue along the line.
Okay, so we're going to move into the first activity, the telling. And basically, paying attention to your surroundings, but really just letting yourself flow, hence why we have the line. Let's all just start moving around the room, following the line. Just walking. We're walking into this world of econ sci-fi. Our context, we are quite a big group, so if we have a few free radicals, that's fine. You're welcome to actually skim across the space if that's what you need. Most important is that you can move. I think we're quite a large group, so if you need to step out of the line, feel free. If you'd prefer to stay on it, go ahead. Now, as you're moving and walking, I want you to put on the hat of the inheritor. You are an inheritor. And what are you an inheritor of? Think about... Yeah, go free radicals, go free radicals. Think about the context that you work in. Thank you. I want you to tune in and consider a component of economic science fiction that the panel have shared with you that really resonates. Perhaps it was something to do with ecological reproduction. Perhaps some of you are working in regenerative development or labor rights. Intellectual property. And as you're walking along, just consider where this component manifests in your work. How does it manifest? Why is it important? And if you wish, you can make a few notes, or you can just let it filter down and decant like a good coffee or glass of wine. Which you will get later. And as you can see, or if you wish, simply walk. And when you're ready, I want you to keep the inheritor hat on, but now put on another hat. And I want you to put on the hat of the map maker. And once you feel comfortable in that hat, I invite you to find a partner or let one find you. And with your partner, keep walking and very quietly just share with each other any of the things that have come to mind, any of the economic science fiction components that have resonated with you? And if it just looks like talking to another person about what is this economic science fiction, do that. And you will see at the bottom of the page a very unusual compass. And when you're ready with your partner, use that compass to navigate the territory of your growing econ sci-fi world. Are you keeping time?
Yes.
Because I need to. I'm
I'm running low on battery, but I'm keeping a total time.
when did I start?
You started 11 minutes ago. Well, call it.
I think I put it into that. I didn't.
I'm going to run out of battery on my phone
That's fine.
unless I find a charger, which I may be able to.
And when that conversation is able to come to a close or find a hiatus, I invite each pair to join forces with another pair. So you now become a group of 4, and together you all put on the hats of the questioner. Groups of 4 or more, and you're now the questioner. Pull apart each other's thoughts, question each other. Keep moving, friends, keep moving. Interesting. Interesting that they've stopped.
Yeah, it's harder to move in a call with this many.
It is, it is. Okay. Alex, diagrams.
We did the work on the diagram.
And as you're slowly congregating together, find a table to gather around and sit back down at a table. In that group, slowly make your way back to a table. No, please. You can keep the conversation going and slowly make your way back to the table. taking the conversation to a table so we can move into the next activity. Okay, now Alex is handing out diagrams. If you're not yet at a table, when you're ready, please sit down at one. Yes, please. Thank you. Okay, find a group, a table to sit with. It's important that you are in a group for the following activities, at least the phase after the next one. You can stay with the same group, you can move to a new group. Okay, so we're now moving out of orientations. Does everyone feel oriented, orientated? Okay. I invite you to turn to page 8. Page 8 with speculations on it called diagram hacking. Now, the beautiful thing about how these experiments are designed is that I don't mind that people are still talking, because you have all the activities in front of you and you can guide yourselves through them when you're ready. And this is on purpose. So really, you have complete freedom to keep talking if you want. I'm merely here as a thread to hold you if you wish. So all the activities are there guiding your way. That being said, diagram hacking on purpose, I especially very, very minimally described. And the reason being is that this is one of my favorite tools because it is about actually working with the misfit. We're not trying to find a straight solution. We're not trying to necessarily find something that is aligned. We're actually working with what doesn't work, perhaps, or what might not seem obvious. Malka said that story starts with conflict. She also talked about how fiction and sci-fi comes out of her frustrations, what she's feeling challenged by. So you're now hopefully pretty well oriented to your context. This activity here is basically an invitation for you to stretch that context to the wildest, the most wild places possible by taking a random diagram. This is a diagram of the biology of an eye. Okay, what would it look like if I mapped the thing that I am most challenged by right now, okay, organizational decision-making processes? What would it look like if I mapped organizational decision-making processes onto the diagram of an eye, but instead of just mapping organizational decision-making processes, I mapped my wildest dream of organizational decision-making processes, and let me assure you, I've thought about it, telepathy. What would it look like if I mapped telepathic decision-making processes onto this diagram of the biology of an eye? This is your invitation right now, my friends. This is you getting a chance to stretch your frustrations, your challenges into your wildest dreams, and for them not have to make sense, for them to be weird and bizarre, and possibly even broken. This is an activity you do independently, and I'll give you 5 minutes to do so. Independently as an individual. you can, if you've come up with an idea together, you can. Okay, we're really getting somewhere, and it's amazing to see these diagrams filling up. And just remember that this is a space where anything goes. Everything is right. Everything is possible. And we're going to wind this activity up in the next couple of minutes. Okay, so now with your diagrams in hand, your minds stretched, your bodies in unknown worlds where everything is possible. We are going to continue in the speculations phase of this session. So we're still in the speculative world. Anything is possible. And we're going to move to the next activity on page 8 called microfictions. Now, I've put paper clips on your tables. Every table has some paper clips, so you can keep your diagram. Attach your diagram to your booklet. This is now a part of your little compass. This is now a part of your little take-home toolkit. And you can keep it in mind and heart and body as you move into this next activity.
Okay. So you can continue to do that if that's what you're interested in, and you're getting into it and you're getting into the teeth of it, and you're starting to see how those ideas fit and don't fit onto things that they were not designed to show. Or you can jump across and join the second activity, which is a writing activity. So this one is a visual activity. The other one is a writing activity. The notes that went out on the table earlier, the post-it notes, they are your starting point for this activity. The idea behind this is that you take one concept from each set of colors, one blue, one yellow, one pink, and you combine them together and you write a very short, effectively an introduction to a news in brief section, or the dust jacket description of a novel that you are going to write that might be a combination of those three ideas. So, for example, on this table here, economic idea, stateless people. So my book, my story, has to be about people who have no state. Then I have a science fiction trope, a thing that we will always find in science fiction, without which we will not have a science fiction book. Faster than light travel. Must be possible. So my story has to now be about stateless people who have faster than light travel. And, sure. And speculative position. It is set in 100 years' time, and it starts on Earth. So that gives me a confine. I know that between now, in the next 100 years, in my story world, in my speculative fiction world, we have to have invented faster than light travel, but we have lost our home. Now that gives me all kinds of crazy ideas that I can go off running with about, okay, well then I need to think about this, and maybe we're lost in this. That is your opportunity. You do not have to use these ones that are on the table. You have blanks as well of each color. So feel free to add your own ideas under each of these titles. A science fiction trope, ray guns, Martians, cyborgs, whatever. There are hundreds. It's probably the most fertile fictional grounds to choose from in terms of things that we associate with that particular genre. Write them out. Put some of your problems in there, your own personal issues, onto the blue ones. Maybe you need to deal with problems, people's access to water. That's an issue that people have to face. Write it down on one of the blue, oh, you haven't got them on the table, but I'll get you some. Write that down as an idea on one of the blue Post-its, and then start to combine them together. So you have a pink, a yellow, and a blue.
Push the fun in this activity, because I think I can see some people be like, oh, because they're really stretching, and these are some straight people. So push how they can just have fun, I think.
Oh yeah. There's a few. These are just suggestions. This is a suggestion. This is a suggestion. Feel free to come up with your own. Yellow is speculative position. So where, when, what's different? Red is a science fiction trope. So it might be aliens in space, or it might be ray guns, or it might be everyone has bionics, or. And blue is a problem or an issue that you're bringing into the room. And this is just. Sure, you can either you can write your own, or you can write them and swap them between yourselves. And don't have to. You can do it on your own or as a group. It's just a chance to have.
So once we do these 3 things, what are we supposed to do? Sorry.
Then we take them together, and we, with those three confines, we start to write the story that brings those 3 things together. Literally, like it's the back of a book or a dust jacket for a book. Sure. I mean, if you want to collaborate and come together on it, that's also cool. But it's just a chance to do something a bit crazy and fun and in the middle of a conference.
Can we do one? Let's say Donald Trump and Darth Vader, and then we have the phase in between.
So here we have. Problem is autocracy. Yeah, there's your issue. Yeah, and your science fiction.
Shouldn't it have been a yellow one? The problem?
No, that's a position. So that's where, when, what's different. What means that we're not writing about the world we live in. That's what the yellow one is. So the pink one you suggest is what I'm going to call big bad guy. There we are. Darth Vader is a big bad guy. And when do you want to set it? Where do you want it to be? Be anywhere. What makes it different what makes it different from today? Perfect one, and this already exists. If I was to write, that, we're dealing with the problem of autocracy. Science fiction trope is bad guy. A long time ago, far, far away. That is the plot to Star Wars. Transferred into 3 post-it notes. Now you can take those and add to them and come up with something else. Another problem, if I were to add in, like, instead of autocracy, my problem now is
Take our group one for the president.
it's a long time ago, far away. Now I have the plot to the series of novel Q by Frank Herbert. Or Mad Max, yeah. I mean, that would be in the near future. But feel free. Like, add some other ideas on there. And then the idea is just to say, okay, I'm going to take this story. I'm going to take these prompts for a story. simple, very very condensed prompts, and I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to imagine a story, my own personal story, that is set a long time ago, far away. It has a big bad guy who needs to be defeated, but the main issue is there's access to water. How might that look? Like, yeah? But you don't have to stick to the ones you know, but feel free. You know, if you want to just like write the simple plot of Mad Max, go for it. It's just a way of condensing our issues and having a bit of fun and showing that there is a balance that we can have when we throw all of these ideas around randomly. Sure. No worries.
I thought it was the.
I'm going to say me. Okay, you should have some, if you've come up with your own ideas for the post-it notes and you put them down, wonderful. If you haven't and you're going to use the ones that were already there, also wonderful. We've got a few more minutes on this particular exercise. So now, if you haven't already done so, this is your opportunity to start to literally write that fiction. It can be as short as a sentence. It can be as long as you have time to write. This could be the beginning of you writing your science fiction novel. Who knows? Maybe that's what we've inadvertently done. But now is the chance into the booklets to write, and I see furtive scribbling, so that's wonderful, to write that idea down that brings together those three particular areas into one story. Or as a group. Perfect. Wonderful. Done. If you have already written your stories, you will see underneath that there is a suggestion that you pass your story to the person sitting next to you or somewhere else on the table, and you share that story. You allow each other to read the idea that you have just written. And this is the time when you get to interrogate that idea, and you get to say, oh, that's interesting. That reminds me of this thing that happens in the real world.
We're 35 minutes away from 6, which is our finish time, and we've got a 20-minute activity left, plus a bit of a pose, so I said we're going to finish on time.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to rush the ideation relay then, because I have 3 minutes. They're slower.
Because the thing is just saying, like, these two things can be done in parallel if you want, or you can move on. Some people stuck to the diagrams, other people move to the writing.
Yeah. No, it's good. Okay, so we're now going to move into applications, I think. Yeah?
Right away, or just going to do a quick minute?
No, you close.
Okay, so you should have had a chance to read each other's stories. Maybe you're still writing them, it's okay. But if you have finished writing, hand that over. Bring what you're writing to a short close. Hand it over to someone near you. And read the story idea that's come through. And maybe you can see in there the beginnings of peer-to-peer sharing network that they're using as an idea, which exists in the real world. Or maybe they're using an idea based around open source circular economies. And that's the fundamental basis of their idea. And if you do spot something like that, point it out. Say, oh, this thing already exists. We experience this in this particular aspect of our work.
Alex, you tell me when you're ready.
Not doing my exercise.
No, I don't want to talk about their lack of participation right now. and Alberto said they're critiquing the whole thing.
Okay.
So I don't want to, well, that's an assumption, to be honest, but I got a time. So are we ready? Because I'm going to start from here, and I want to get everyone's attention because they're not really listening. So you tell me, I've got... Hello, okay. Yeah? Okay, so we all well know Martin Luther King saying, "I had a dream." And right now, we are at the closing moment of the speculations phase of this session. And I will divulge to you a little dream I have had. Many of you work for this organization. My dream, Alberto, please, excuse me, panelists, I can't speak because you're talking very loudly. Thank you. I'm sharing a dream that I've had, and that dream has been to do experimental, abstract, but very, very useful activities with this organization that you work with. And here I am. So I'm standing here having taken a wild dream and somehow turned it into a reality. And that is the segue for us to move into the next phase, the final phase of this session, applications. You've moved through orientations, you've moved through your contexts, you've stretched your imagination to hacking diagrams, you've written microfictions, or you've talked to each other about what might be possible. And now we're going to apply it, or we're going to figure out how we can apply it. So this activity is called a collaborative ideation relay. The power in this activity is collective intelligence, that everyone has something to offer to how this idea can become a reality. It's an evolution of a well-known tool used in architecture and community development known as the charrette. I'm sure many of you are familiar with it. And basically, we move through 4 steps. Now, I know we've asked you, take an idea, take another idea, take another idea. Now is your chance to synthesize all of that, be in this moment, and go, okay, actually, this is an idea I could actually take into the work I do. It's a little bit edgy, but we're here together with all of our minds to come up with a pathway. So I want you to take a moment independently, longer than a moment actually, you're going to get about 3 minutes, to synthesize an idea that you legitimately feel like, okay, edgy enough, but I could possibly do something with this. And on page, I think it's 12, or maybe it's 11. No, it's 11. Applications. Oh no, it's 11. You've got step 1. So again, self-guided. I'm going to give you about 3 minutes. This you do alone, independently. Write an idea down that you think you could actually translate into your work. And after 3 minutes, we'll move on. 1 minute. Okay, so slowly wrapping up your idea. It's quick and dirty work, this work. Quick and dirty. Okay, so now you are going to entrust your colleagues, your fellows, who you are sitting with, to take this idea to the next step. And you're going to hand your booklet to the person to your left. Okay? Hand your idea to the person to your left. Okay. As you can see, with this step, you are going to get another 3 minutes, and you are going to write down, well, first of all, of course, you're going to read the idea, and you are going to write down the list of elements that are required to make this idea possible. You could think about it almost like a recipe, if you wish. If I want a lasagna, I'm going to need pasta. I'm going to need passata. I'm going to need cheese. I'm going to need an oven. Perhaps I'll need an apron. So independently, you have 3 minutes, and you write down for your colleague the elements or ingredients that are needed for this idea to become possible. Halfway. What elements, what ingredients are needed for this idea to become possible? Phone? Okay. I don't have a charger, but I have a cable. Oh, do you have a cable? I see. For an iPhone, yeah. Oh, wait, can we just wait till we finish the thing? Yeah, just because I'm a bit... 1 minute. slowly winding down the list of elements or ingredients. Okay, so now it is time to hand the booklet over again to entrust your colleagues, your allies once more. So please take that booklet and hand it to the person to your left. Again, person to your left. So you're handing the booklet you just wrote the elements for to the person to your left. And you can turn the page and we're moving on to step 3. Step 3, handing the booklet to the person to your left. And with a new idea and new elements, what you're going to do now is you're going to write the list of actions that would be necessary with these elements. In the example, you'll see I wrote a lease for a rural women's co-working space. The action would be go and find a real estate who would give you that lease, or a property owner. Okay? So take a moment to read the idea, take a moment to read the list of elements. Now write a series of actions that would be required to turn this idea into a reality. You have 3 minutes. Step 3. That's funny. Great. Hmm? Halfway.
You arrive 2 in the morning, as you say. I was on the phone and I was like, ooh. But yeah, I will recover at some point. Now there is also a kind of exhibition opening here, no? Do you have the overall program? How it, you know how it works? But maybe it's around 6 or something. Okay, okay. Yeah, okay, okay.
Keep breathing, 30 seconds.
Where do we keep it? It's no, well, essentially it's an organism that exists in the wild. You can find it in very humid areas and logs and things like that. But we normally have a kind of little.
And trust the intelligence of the idea holder that you don't need to finish all the steps. You've carried them to where you can. And now it's time to pass the booklet over one last time. So you're going to move to step 4 and pass the booklet again one last time to the person to your left. So passing the booklet one last time to the person to your left. Step 4 is
Really weird thing. And
writing a call to arms or a little manifesto for this idea. This is the little thing that you might shout out from the balcony, send as an email. It's the little manifesto for the idea. It is the idea now speaking for itself. This is me. Take a moment to read the idea, the elements,
point and creates kind of main
actions, and now let it come out and speak for itself.
it creates a kind of main networks. But what is interesting is that
3 minutes.
leaves these kind of places in the places where it's been. So for instance here you can see that there is a kind of network. It would be easier to see if you had some light. Normally I have a light box. But yes, exactly. It's a kind of a distributed memory, in fact, because since obviously there is no nervous systems, no capacity to store information, and its morphology is constantly changing. But these traces that are left on the substrate allow the organism to create a kind of embedded memory. Self-organization emerges because of these traces that are left. So when the thing goes back in a certain area, those kind of lines, are kind of reactivating. So it enables the organism to find, let's say, the best way quicker. Then, of course, in the meantime, if the conditions of the nutrients are changed, then it will adapt. And again, it's all happening through these kind of little biochemical reactions that happen locally, and this basically induces the flow. So it's a complete.
It can be one line,
Pattern, no?
it can be a paragraph.
Yeah. In fact, this is maybe you don't.
Halfway.
But for instance, yeah. That's exactly the one. Yeah. That's why they call it. That's why they call it a kind of a biological computer. Because in fact, it's a kind of like a machine that doesn't use its zeros or ones, but it's able to take virtually any shape and respond to these conditions. The experiment of the network is very interesting because it is true that on one side it kind of finds solutions that are similar to the man-made ones, but what is fascinating is that the way it finds them is completely different. So to a certain extent, the optimization has got nothing to do with the way we. So in that sense, that's why it's interesting. It kind of provides some
30 seconds.
organization that seems to find solutions that are pertinent to the system, but it finds them in a way that is embedded, so it's kind of much more resilient and robust in the solution. And of course, if you look close, the solutions are not the same because the way this network is, unlike networks or engineers. Yes. So it's very convoluted, very twisted, and the edges.
Okay, and slowly bringing it to a close. And when you're ready, hand the idea, the booklet back to the original idea holder. You should know it's 4 people to your right. It should be pretty simple. If you're on a smaller table, you'll know. It'll probably be 1 person next to you. And for each idea holder, take a moment to read over the pathway of this idea, to sip it, to digest it in.
This is why we found it quite stimulating and fascinating. Yes, my mascot, and I kind of use it a bit as a kind of tool of thinking tool, but also as a simulation tool, but mainly as a thinking tool. Yeah, we have done some interesting stuff. Like I have done a whole series of drawings, like on paper.
Yeah.
Where I draw this on top of
Yeah.
wood and tracing paper, and then it reaches a certain point that I like. I kind of dry it with a hairdryer, and then it blocks.
And
You can always react.
there is some good news, because regardless of how your idea has ended up, there are other little ways in which you can bring it to life, or any of this for that matter. On the second back page, just before just the next page really, after your manifesto, there is a page called DIY Rituals. Now this is me at my quirkiest yet, okay? But quirky and fun is how we get this done, right? So these are just little activities. Some are super easy, some are a little bit more ambitious for you to take home with you and play around if you want to keep doing that. One is to cook your idea as though it was a meal or a world. Others play with the compass. Others play with time. There's 3 activities, maximum 5 steps. You can do them whenever you like, or you don't need to do them at all. This is our offer to you. It has been an absolute pleasure. Just as a little recap, we are Edgeryders Research Network. We are a global community collaborating across collective intelligence, development, innovation. Many of us, almost all of us, are independent practitioners. Alex and I here are independent as well. There is a link on the back page to the Econ Sci-Fi group on Edgeryders. This is where, if you're inspired or want to know more, you can join the conversation, you can read the threads, you can see the reading list. We're on Twitter. I am at Anique Vered. There's at Edgeryders. You'll see all of us in the Next Gen Gov thread. And I very much invite your feedback, your reflections. Any of you feel so compelled, please come up and share with us how this has been with you. I would love to hear, because we designed it especially for you today. As a little closing, for any of you that feel comfortable, one of the things I love to do is to have a bit of popcorn to end and to just share one word that comes out that kind of encapsulates how I'm feeling now. There's a little nugget, there's a little bite to take with me. Just one word that encapsulates how I'm feeling right now at the end of this session.
Because it can actually conduce small currents, and so they're using that as a kind of control brain. So there are some fascinating experiments.
Honored. Alex, any closing words?
Watching the way that you have engaged with what we have done, what we have presented to you, has been a wonderful experience. From the trepidation of standing in a strange circle through to this sound and this level of conversation that's been bubbling away at the tables as you pass things around, through the crazy, wild conversations of the speculation, has been really, like, I think humbling is a great word for it, because I've seen you move forward, and I've seen you make connections with the people around the table, with the ideas, with the issues, and possibly, and hopefully, with some of those solutions. So that's all I have to say. My one word would be I'm kind of honored.
And on that note, trust that you've got all the tools you need for all you're doing in the program work. Introduce an offer, either go out there and align with people and know that you've got the tools to do so well done. We are ahead of time, which is a very good sign. Because this is all about our futures and being prepared for them and speculating and reaching them and letting them reach us. So we've got some space to stretch and to move. We're only a few minutes ahead of time, but we're ahead of time and we're ahead of time together. So thank you again for your commitment, participation, attention. A round of applause again to our panelists.
Good. Well done.
Yes, before I fiddle with it.
Guys made. How you guys made?
Who wants a drink? Woohoo! We've got some woohoos in the house for a drink. That's it? Just one person? Who wants to go to a cocktail? Yay! All right, you guys have to fill out a survey to get to a cocktail. Woo! All right, so we had a massive fail after lunch with this link. We're going to try again, all right? Can you please log on to the link and try to answer 3 super, super teeny tiny questions. It should take you about 60 seconds.
What happened to the link?
Okay. Enter this link.
Can we get some music? Link's not working? Link's not working?
Okay, can I just pick on a couple of people, no microphones. The first question was around what is something that you found really risky, something that scared you from the zones of experiments that you've been to, okay? So if shout a word or two, what is something that you found risky? What is something that scared you from what you've seen and learned today? Anybody? I'm gonna start picking on people, so may as well just, yeah, go.
Lack of social process associated with technological innovation.
Lack of social process, that's a good one. Who else? You can shout out.
Data protection concerns with technology solutions.
Data protection concerns with technology solution. Good one. Shout.
Excessive trust in technology.
Excessive trust in technology. Shout.
I am afraid that we may not experiment on people too much because it's people.
Okay, ethics, ethics. Yeah? Lack unintended consequences. I like that we're living in the world of unintended consequences. Somebody here? No? One or two more people? No? Okay. Yeah.
Slow mindset change. Slow? Mindset.
Slow mindset change. That's a good one. Okay, risks. What about excitement? What got you really excited about what you've learned, especially pertaining to your own work and something that you can really start thinking about and doing on Monday? Yes, shout. No copy-paste projects, no copy-paste projects. Thank you. Who else? Yes. Getting away from strong institutions. We have a rebel in the house. Double drink for you. Who else?
We can say that. Okay.
Come on, we have to have more excitements than risks. Because this glass is kind of half full, crew. Anybody? Really? Okay, go. Okay. What's the favorite project that you heard? Ray, go ahead.
Evolution of technology.
Very good one. Yeah. Very good. Twice with the same answer. That's an art. Anybody else? Yes. Very good. Okay, so just a point to make before handing it to Indy is ideally what we would like to walk away with tomorrow afternoon is the moment that you stepped into this room today, you came in with projects and policy work that you do, right? Everybody had their own stuff that they're doing. By the time you walk out tomorrow afternoon, ideally you should be taking home interesting new ways in which you can stretch the stuff that you have been planning to do. Our teams are here at your disposal. We have Edgeryders, we have dark matter labs, we have UNDPs across the world to help. Ideally, we walk away. There might be some investment, some seed funding to support your experimentation in your country offices. Hint, hint. Ideally, we want to be able to walk away tomorrow afternoon having an idea what you can experiment with in your own projects, which means that zones of experiments are really crucial to be exposed to and excited by new ways of doing the work that you do today. Right, so we have a couple of more tomorrow morning, and this is just to get you sort of in the mood of 2 more, make the most out of them, and we'll be here to support. Okay, Indy?
I mean, maybe we can go a bit further in terms of the feedback. These were short notes, but just to ask you for a general feedback. What are ideas you learned about, experiments you learned about today, you think you can implement tomorrow in your country? Yes?
Social media mining, well actually we were doing that, but we can do it more.
Let me help. I mean, so, look, you've all been on a journey with us last day, right, today. And it's been a slightly kind of, I would say slightly kind of, how do we deal with this? But let's go back to the morning conversation a little bit. The next 10 years is going to be fundamentally different from the last 20 that you've operated in. And every experiment that we've shown you is an experiment not done by a $5 billion organization called the UNDP. Right? You are a $5 billion organization whose duty it is to look after the future of the development of the world. And the world itself is in deep crisis. So all the brilliant experiments you've seen, right, are tantalizing pathways to a different way of thinking. And all the zones of experiments are structured in that way to show different possibilities. So why do we talk about the commons, right? Because we think, right, in the conversation, we think and we know one of the biggest crises we have is actually in the destruction of common goods. Whether it's air pollution, climate change, or whether it goes all the way down into water rights, or it goes down to other structural issues on access to work and other things. So we have some serious issues here. Or whether we look at even the kind of, or whether we look at actually Simon's session, which was basically looking at, we are currently expecting by 2050, 300 million people, 300 million people to be made effectively stateless or landless as a result of the implications of climate change. 300 million people. World War II was 68 million, and we've already passed it. So, scale. You guys are the people tasked to think about this problem. And it goes at every level. So, Alberto and Edgeryders, who did a brilliant session here, it also goes at the cultural level. What do we dream? In 1968, right, on national TV in America, 1968, Captain Kirk kissed Uhura. It was the first interracial kiss on on national TV. First one. This was 6 months after Martin Luther King had been assassinated. 6 months after. The role was to create a whole new possibility of the world. The role of science fiction and the way we see the world has massive power to transform the possibility space. That current possibility space has been undermined. We think tomorrow will be little more than what it was yesterday. We're constrained beautifully by narratives, which are actually, we think we can not move out of the current narratives. But we know the scale of the problems that we're facing are actually paradigm leaps. So if you look at any of the zones of experiments, what they're trying to hint at is the scale of challenges that we're asked to embrace. And I guarantee you this, these challenges will have to be dealt with in the next 10 years. Right? And there will be countries and places that will deal with them. You guys are entrusted to look after this. So even when we looked at all the experiments, there's some brilliant experiments coming out. Key reflection, are you operating at the scale of the challenge? Right? This is only day one. But that's why this conversation was what it was. Are we operating at genuinely the scale of the challenge? And how do we start to think about this for tomorrow and the day after? So it's a really interesting framework.
I think we have some feedback there.
Thank you for saying this, because it's the big problem I've had throughout the day. It is a scale. There are several of us who have responsibilities in the UN, and although the experiments are very interesting, it's very difficult to see how you go beyond the experiment on a very small scale into something that really has an impact in the country. And I think that is where our responsibility is. And those of us who have been in the system for a while, that was the big question. So how do we bring this to scale? How do we make it so that the governments pick it up, or the other key actors that need to be on board? Otherwise, it's nice, it's fun, it's cute, but it's not going to make a difference.
I agree with you, but at the same time, if you look at what Regen Network, I'm just using them as an example, what they're proposing and underlying what's underneath it is fundamentally a different way of looking at public good contracting and actually understanding public goods in a fundamentally different way. We know those translations are starting to happen. They are an indicator into a different way of thinking about public and common goods and how we can structure them. So I suppose these are all indicators, all of them, and I think all the tools and experiments were there to do that. I mean, one of the brilliant sessions Simon hosted in London, looking at, if you were looking at dealing with 300 million, you have to fundamentally re-understand the right to work. There's other issues that come to the table that I think UNDP can certainly lead on. Sir, all yours.
No, thank you very much. I think the key narrative should be that this discussion stimulates all of our colleagues into a deeper grappling of the challenges we face. It's a little too early to begin to anticipate what you're going to do when you go back. We are still in that interrogation mode, reflecting and tuning over everything we're hearing and trying to match that to our country context. Because as interesting and stimulating as it is, as a decision maker, I'm looking at the team that I have, I'm looking at the challenges that I face, I'm looking at my national partners, I'm looking at how UNDP works, because it's a corporate institution, like a cruise liner, takes time to turn around, and I'm looking at the decision points I will have to make to be able to move this in a way that it begins to make a difference. And that's work in progress. So ideally, perhaps with all these fascinating ideas we've heard, if you match that with some practical experience of where this has been tried and tested or even failed, then it makes it easier to begin to connect where this can go forward. That's why for many of us, the Prime Minister's example was excellent. And of course, we know we're running out of time. It would have been wonderful to ask him lots of questions about the various decision points, the challenges they had to overcome, the wins they had to build with different stakeholders, because then it gives you a practical comparative experience of the decision making that had to happen, but also how you build consensus and political will in government. Because there were vested interests, obviously, in government who want to maintain the status quo. So if you frame the discussion around that presented by the Prime Minister, there are many things some of us can take away. And if you ask us by tomorrow evening what I was going to do when I go back to my country, I will have some answers for you. So it's a little too early to start talking about that now.
I've got one more over there, and then Simon, over to you.
All the experiments shown, right, as you rightly said, they're global in nature. And the scale is very large. Now, there is in theory, we could tackle those things with a global nation at a global level. The reality is, we still live in a nation state, still live in 193 members of the United Nations. Now, that just say that we as an organization of $5 billion with offices in 170 countries in the world have to figure out a way, and this is not impossible, that we can tackle the commons problem or the migration problems 170 times, right, at national level, in a coherent way that it then aggregates to the global scale that you're talking about, right? And that is what I think UNDP does not yet know how to do. How to tackle a global issue, both at the global level, at the national level, but do it at the national level in a coherent way, which then aggregates back to a global response.
Thanks. So maybe just to continue the theme of impacting at scale, but to give perhaps a slightly different example. So the United Nations is not the world's leading organization on financial inclusion, but we invented the space. You know, we invented the language, we shaped the narrative, and there are tens of thousands of organizations that have absolutely no idea where the narrative came from, that are completely pegged into what we invented. Yeah, that doesn't mean we necessarily do that on the ground, but it does mean that we've shaped an entire field in its formative stages, and that has catalyzed work from multiple different actors. I think similarly, in some of the areas we're looking at, we need to be cautious in assuming that conceptual work is impractical and work on the ground is practical. I think this is a misunderstanding about how to figure out pathways of change. Sometimes doing something on the ground is exactly what's needed. So let's not in any way reduce the importance of whatever ground level work means happening. But often when one's dealing with scale issues, the opportunity that an institution, however large it is, has, is not to aggregate, but to shape a story that brings many other actors into an area, innovative, interconnecting, and gradually, as that innovation begins, perhaps shaping rules of the game. You know, there's a sort of a next stage to the story. And indeed, suddenly, as that field begins to emerge, in some countries, there's stuff to do, but not necessarily for the UN, maybe also for other organizations. So the first thing I'd say is let's think about pathways of change and where interventions to shift systemic challenges and opportunities are, rather than assuming it's got to be what we do in Lusaka on a Monday morning. And then my second point, sorry if I can just take the liberty for a second, Indy, is that there is in my mind, Indy, you maybe need to clarify this if I'm wrong or right, there's a difference between piloting and prototyping. Piloting is trying small things out, and if they work, then trying to do them again and again, more and more, larger and larger. That's piloting. And that's what the entire development industry since 1945 has done for its bread and butter. Yeah. Prototyping isn't just a language shift. We're not just in a trendy London moment. Yeah. The thinking behind prototyping is that it has a catalytic effect on many other actors. That it isn't just a pilot, but it's a change process in itself. And maybe, Indy, I may be being sort of overly dancing on a pin, but maybe you need to tease that out a little bit, because I can see that every time you say prototyping, people hear pilots. And I don't think you're having the same conversation.
That's a good point.
Thank you.
No, good clarification, Simon. Thank you.
Yeah, just to build on that, I couldn't agree with Simon more, but I think a lot of the prototyping and the experiments that are shown depend on, and the people who are engaged in them understand levels of technology and what they're doing in a way that we yet collectively, all right, I don't work for the UN system anymore, but many of us yet don't fully understand the technologies that we're talking about or the platforms that we're talking about. So I think there is a discomfort where we need to get over and make sure we fully grasp what we're hearing in terms of the examples and are able to absorb and integrate that into our work. And I think that takes some time. I think there's also a question for those of us who work on governance and rule of law and human rights, which we haven't gotten to here, but some of the more ethical questions around what do we prototype? Why do we prototype certain types of things? What are the implications? What are the potential drawbacks and the potential successes that we have in front of us? And there we need to be able to understand the experiments and be able to be allowed to go into a discussion, not just about what we're going to do on Monday, but also about the choices that we're making and why we're making those choices.
I think, so excellent point. Before I hand over, one of the things that I think is really interesting, and something we've been actually spent a couple of days in Istanbul, was talking to a brilliant man called Luca Gatti, and he's been working with insurance companies to actually, how do they understand risk and horizons of risk? And one of the big reflections that came out of that was actually horizons of risk. So if you look at the future, there are multiple risks. How do you understand it is not just a case as simple as just reading books. Actually, what they do is they invest in strategic learning options. That could be a startup, it could be actually just a conference, it could be a series of discussions. The purpose of those learning options is to advance and reduce the asymmetry of knowledge between you and what the likely future brings. That is a very powerful way to start to reduce that information gap. Once you understand that information gap, you can then actually strategically start to look at how do you hedge against those risks? How do you actually manage them? So we're not saying at the end of 2 days you've got it done and sorted, but there are very clear pathways, as Shelley rightly pointed out. How do you actually shorten that learning gap that's there between the now and the complexity of the world that's facing you? I'm not expecting you to absorb the business model of tokenized systems and public good infrastructures and smart contracts all in 40 minutes. But what I'm starting to say is that that gap we are going to have to foreshorten and understand. And all the governance-related issues, all the ethical issues that implant and the behavioral issues that are locked into that, right? How do we fund it? How do we structure it? So I think this exposure is largely about that. The learning options, the existing learning options, all these experiments show that. And we know mindset shifts of how we perceive the future sometimes are as powerful as any technological shifts. And we know tomorrow you'll see something about civic juries, citizen assemblies, even places and frameworks of discussion. Actually, how you conceive a discussion is fundamental in changing the outcome of that source. So we held a debate around universal basic income, right? As soon as people walked in, 70% of people said, we don't like it because everyone's going to get lazy. After 6 hours of conversation with people they never met before, that discussion had pivoted a whole 180 degrees. 70% of people were in favor. So how you host a discussion can fundamentally change the adoption and framework for progressive policy, right? So how we create this stuff is important. It's not just technology in a kind of material technology way, it's all the way through in that story. I'm sorry, thank you.
I will briefly, just 3 points regarding the feedback. First of all, I think still it may be important to go beyond tech and consider other dimensions as well. Global compact, society, transforming societies, middle class and raising middle class and others, because it affects the dynamics as a whole. Second, the experiments are really brilliant, but they are based on a number of assumptions. And it would be good to relax these assumptions and see what happens and bring a bit more practicality to show how it will work in real environments with real problems. And third, I still think, maybe I'm wrong, but innovation is a kind of an instrument, and tech is about how we are changing. But what we are changing, I think we are not discussing it that much. And governance is about what we need to change, and maybe we need to go beyond and look more on the structural dimensions and what exactly needs to be changed and how governance could be an enabler for that, and how tech as an enabler for governance could help.
Totally.
Thank you, Camilla. I think it's great. I think both Shelley and Camilla brought us a bit back to the opening questions we had this morning as well. And yes, we will continue tomorrow with the zones of experimentations, but after the zones of experimentations, we will have exactly these panels as well, where we discuss exactly the challenge of going from prototyping or piloting to elevating this really to how we inform policy making. I think that's the big challenge. And further on in the last panel on what does this all mean for the governance for the future of governance and peace building including, of course, the normative values. And this is what we would like to discuss tomorrow as well. With that, I think it is 6:45. lunch was late, but we don't want to be so late with the cocktail, so it's all ready. But the program is not over. Please enjoy over the cocktail, but we will have a very exciting art exhibition, and we hope we can continue our discussions over a glass of wine.